Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. Um, First, let me introduce myself. My name is Michael Burton. I'm a planner with the Fairfax County Department of Planning and Development. I am joined this evening by a couple of my colleagues, Clara Johnson, also with the Department of Planning and Development, and David Human. This may be perhaps it could be a relatively informal meeting. We have a much smaller crowd than we typically have. Um, we'll talk a little bit about tonight's proceedings, but I wanted to gauge the audience this evening. If you are a member of the public, if you wouldn't mind just unmuting and giving us a sense of which items you're here for, we might be able to.
Church Street.
Church Street. Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Church Street.
Church Street. All right. Thank you, Mrs. Irene Zenos. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Just let me know if I butchered it. Are there other members of the public on the call? We just wanted to get a quick sense of which items people are here to listen to.
Hi, I just tuned in, so I don't know what the question was, but I'm Angela Vallis, and I'm here to hear about the Church Street proposal.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Vallis.
Michael, this is Clara. It sounds like perhaps we can start with Church Street and then see if anybody's here for any of the other nominations at that point, in case new people join.
Yeah, that's good. All right, let me see if I can move the presentation. I just want to check with everyone. Are you able to see the presentation on your screen? Okay, awesome. Thank you all. So as I mentioned, my name is Michael Burton. I'm with the Department of Planning and Development, and we're here to talk to you all tonight about our site-specific plan amendment process. You'll probably hear us refer to it as SSPA for short. We have 3 items that we plan to discuss tonight. One of them is, of course, the Church Street example or Church Street nomination, and then there are 2 in the Seven Corners area. This is actually a repeat of a meeting that we held in person on January 11th. And for the purposes of being consistent across all of our meetings, we wanted to make sure that there was a virtual component available to folks in case you weren't able to attend the first meeting, but also so that you could review the meeting on your own time afterwards. This meeting will and is being recorded, just to let everyone know. We have about 20 minutes, I think, allotted or so for each nomination. We will go through a brief presentation introducing the nomination, and then we've invited our nominators here to also give a brief presentation and to help answer any questions that you all may have. And again, just depending on the volume of questions that we have and the number of folks on the call, we should have plenty of time to get through everyone's questions. So to begin tonight, we wanted to start with giving everyone just a brief overview of what the SSPA process is, how this relates to the county's comprehensive plan, and why your feedback is important tonight. The site-specific plan amendment process is an opportunity for anyone to submit a proposal for a change to the county's comprehensive plan, specifically for individual properties or a cluster of properties within a relatively small area. Our county's comprehensive plan is a multi-layered document. It's used by both county staff and county officials to help guide land use decisions across all of our communities in the county. It's a pretty substantial document that provides recommendations for how land uses could be used or land could be used in the future. It also includes information related to the protection of environmental and cultural resources, and it helps us think about which areas in the county future growth can and should be accommodated. For this reason, we think of the comprehensive plan as sort of a living document. It's constantly evolving and changing over time. And the SSPA process represents really a first step in a much larger process to think about how we make changes to that document. Excuse me. To help us do this, the plan is comprised of multiple elements. It includes our policy plan, which is relatively broader in nature and encapsulates land use guidance that applies to every land area across the county. It includes, for example, policies related to environmental protection or housing affordability. And these are policies that would apply to any new or redevelopment regardless of their location in the county. We also have what we call area plan guidance, which provides more detailed policy for specific areas. That includes broad areas in the county like Bailey's Crossroads, like Seven Corners, for example. All of the policies between both the policy plan and our area plans staff uses, and the county officials use to help evaluate the potential land use changes or help us evaluate development proposals. There are additional elements to our comprehensive plan. We won't go through all of them tonight, but they similarly include additional layers of information and guidance. An important component of the comprehensive plan is our concept for future development. This is a relatively generalized framework we use to help us consider where future growth in the county is encouraged. There are a number of different categories you can see here color-coded on the map. Each of them represents a different set of recommendations for how areas could continue to grow and develop over time. All of tonight's nominations, however, are located within the red designated area. Those are community business centers. Community business centers, or CBCs for short, are historically older community serving commercial areas that have emerged along or around major roadways. In some of these areas, or in most of these areas, we encourage a mix of uses that are focused around a core area of higher intensity with a town center or main street-like atmosphere in a pedestrian-oriented setting. To reiterate, we are at the very beginning of a longer process. There are various stages of the land development process. If you're new to these types of discussions, land use discussions, then I'm sure that the county's review can seem singular. However, there are multiple components to our review with different questions that we try to answer along the way. This process, the SSPA screening process, precedes all other stages of review. If this is the first time that many of you are hearing about these proposals, it's because we're looking at them for the first time too, with you all. So you're right at the beginning. The planning process itself is the first stage of a formal review, and it precedes even more detailed review process such as zoning actions or site reviews. The timeline for development can vary based on the complexity at each of these stages, but what's most important to note, I think, is that the guidance offered at one stage informs the review at subsequent stages. So the considerations that we make as part of SSPA will inform our review at the planning stage. And subsequently, if the plan is amended, then the comprehensive plan guidance will inform the review at the zoning stage. To help us organize and manage the comprehensive plan amendment projects that we have across the county, planning staff rely on what's called a work program. Effectively, it's a list of projects that the Board of Supervisors has authorized staff to work on. These types of amendments that are on the work program can vary from broader, more county-wide policies such as affordable housing to our site-specific policy considerations, which we'll discuss tonight. Our goal this evening is to begin that discussion about the three nominations that are in your area, or continue the discussions in your area, and for staff to learn what your thoughts and considerations are for each of them. This is in an effort to ultimately help the Board of Supervisors determine which of these ideas should be added to that work program that I mentioned earlier. So really quickly, we received a total of 75 nominations throughout the county. We opened the door for all proposals, SSPA proposals, in October, and we received a total of 75. This has actually changed. The board took action on December 6th, and some of these items were removed from the list. There are actually now only 5 in total in the Mason district, and I think there were 2 removed in the Hunter Mill district. So at present, we're looking at about 70 nominations in total. So on to the screening process. To help us think through the ideas that were submitted, staff will screen each of the proposal for its merits. We're trying to answer just a few key questions at this stage. Does the proposal support long-term county goals or objectives? Should this be added to staff's work program? And if so, what considerations should county staff make if and when we review them? To give you a sense once more of the process and where we are, we're focused solely on the screening stage. This means that none of the ideas that we have received to date have been added to staff's work program just yet. This also means that staff has not had the opportunity to fully evaluate any of the proposals that you'll see until we're authorized to do so by the Board of Supervisors. And that occurs again if they opt to add this to staff's work program. I'm sure that there are going to be a number of questions that many folks on the call may have about each of the nominations, and we're going to do our very best to answer what we can with what we know so far. Some of you are aware of the land development processes. Some of you may be less so, and that's okay. All of your questions we welcome. However, just to reiterate, our process really attempts to answer questions in stages. So the screening process and the plan amendment process represents the first stage of the county's review. And since we haven't had the opportunity to formally evaluate the proposals, which is what we hope to think about tonight, the considerations that you all have and the questions that you all have, we may not be able to fully answer until a later stage. If you have preliminary thoughts tonight about the ideas that you hear, we'd love to hear them. More importantly, we really need to know what are the things you want staff to consider if we are authorized to review them. We also want to understand what your concerns are, but also what the opportunities are that you see with each of these proposals. This will again come into play if this makes it to the work program. If a nomination passes this screening phase that we're in tonight, it's of course added to the work program, as I mentioned multiple times before, but subsequently staff will work with the Board of Supervisors to prioritize all of its work across that work program. So if there are proposals, for example, that more strongly align with the county's objectives or initiatives, it's possible that they may be evaluated sooner. This will include thinking about the items that are already on the work program, items that staff have already been asked to work on. What this means for you all is that the timeline for considering a proposal, if it's added, will vary. So regardless of the timing, when we come to review them on the work program, for example, we will do our best to make sure that you all are informed. We'll share the links to our webpage tonight as well so that you can stay abreast of what's going on and follow along. Likewise, if a nomination is not added to the work program or it does not pass screening, then it simply goes away. A proposal or an idea could be resubmitted in the future. We do need to make note of that. However, if a proposal is resubmitted in our next cycle, which occurs every 2 years, the nominator would need to demonstrate a change in the proposal with sufficient justification for its reconsideration. I should also note that while a proposal may not move forward, it does not mean that a property could not redevelop under its current plan guidance and under its current zoning designation. So really quickly, this is an overall timeline that identifies the steps we've taken to date as part of the SSPA process. We have, again, begun all of our community meetings. And actually, this might be our final community meeting, if I'm not mistaken, across the county. We've held 20+ meetings in all districts, all throughout the county, based on where the nominations have come in. Following these meetings will be a series of Planning Commission workshops. These are open to the public for your participation, and it's here that the Planning Commission will further discuss the nominations and ultimately develop a recommendation for which of these items should be advanced for further review. Following the Planning Commission workshops, we will return to the Board of Supervisors, I believe in late March to early April timeframe, for them to make a decision on which items should be added to that work program. Staff in the interim will continue to work to summarize all of the feedback that we received from our community meetings and our community engagements, including what we hear tonight. And again, we extend the invitation to everyone to participate in the Planning Commission workshops. Tentatively, it's scheduled on February 22nd. It's highly likely that that date may change. It may be pushed back. Again, we'll share the website with you all so that you can stay tuned to what the new date is. All right, so without further ado, I think we're going to jump into our nominations tonight. Again, there were 5 in total that were introduced into the screening process for Mason District. We met on the latter 2, number 1 and number 6 that you see on your screen, last Thursday. And we met on the original 3 beginning on January 11th. And again, this is a repeat of the in-person January 11th meeting. And we wanted to make sure that there was a virtual option available for folks. If you have questions tonight, we do ask that everyone just raise your hand. It's a smaller group, so I don't think it would be too much of an issue, but just to make sure that we're in order, if you could raise your hand, there's an icon at the top of your screen. It may just be a hand that says raise, or it may have a smiley face with a hand on top of it. If you'd like to leave comments in chat, we do have staff monitoring chat as well. Feel free to leave your questions there or comments, and we'll make sure that those are recorded also. For context, once more, we've just taken a cursory look at each of these nominations, and we plan to offer our preliminary considerations for each of them. The nominators, again, are also here to briefly talk about their proposal and to help answer questions. For those who are less familiar with the process, you will likely see a number of technical terms that we use, such as FAR, or for floor area ratio, or square footage, which is represented with SF. These are terms that we generally use to describe the amount of development being proposed. You don't have to be a savant with them. We did ask for concept drawings as a part of the process this cycle, and we hope that gives everyone a better sense of what's being proposed and what's being discussed. Staff will also identify what the current comprehensive plan designation is for each of the subject properties, as well as note that our evaluation will primarily focus on comparing what's in the comprehensive plan today with the comprehensive plan change that's being proposed. We'll stop and take time after each of the nominators have finished their presentations as well. So if you'll bear with me just 1 second, what I'm going to do is switch to the Church Street item first, and then we can continue. And actually, I think it was our very first item, so maybe we were good to go. It is. Okay, so let's bring that back up. So the Church Street nomination concerns, I believe, 10 or 11 parcels. Mr. Houston can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's about 10 parcels or so located on Church Street, just off of Columbia Pike. It's north of Columbia Pike and to the east of Leesburg Pike, just to the east of the shops at Bailey's Crossroads. Some adjacent uses that you all can see on the screen here are the single-family home communities to the north, and institutional use, a place of worship also just to the north of the property. And then there are a number of commercial uses, some smaller commercial uses along Columbia Pike as well. The area currently, the subject area, is planned for retail and office use. Within our comprehensive plan categories, there are a number of subunits that bisect the property, and so there are a series of recommendations that apply to I think 2 or 3 parcels that are closest to the shops at Bailey's Crossroads, and then the remaining parcels that are closer to Payne Street. All of them, to simplify it, recommend some level of retail and office use, with a portion of it consisting of a residential component. So there is an option in the current comprehensive plan guidance for, I believe, townhomes on a certain portion of the parcels. The proposal that we'll take a look at tonight is for a 4-story mixed-use structure. It includes about 60 multifamily residential units with up to 18,000 square feet of ground floor retail. And really quickly, this is a concept that was shared by the nominator. Again, to the left side or right side of your screen, excuse me, is where the shops at Bailey's Crossroads are located. It consists of a single structure with 2 access points, one to the east and one to the west. There is a portion of open space that's made available for the potential users of the site, the residents specifically, along with parking to the rear. A couple of considerations that staff have made early on. Again, as I've mentioned, the current plan does offer or allow for redevelopment that encourages a mix of uses. This is consistent with the community business center designation that we mentioned earlier as part of the concept for future development. There are some considerations that we would like to make regarding the frontage. The current plan language recommends that redevelopment in the subunits west of the shops at Bailey's Crossroads consolidate to the highest extent possible and front Columbia Pike. We also want to ensure that the scale of the development is appropriate for its location, and that the transition between the commercial uses and the neighboring residential uses is also appropriate. Generally speaking, there is support for the provision of additional housing. This is something that the county has a lot of interest in, and continues to want to encourage a broader range of housing types across the county. So with that, I will turn things over to Mr. Houston to share his presentation.
Thank you. Can you see my screen there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michael. I am David Houston. I'm the land use attorney with Bean, Kinney, and Corman, and I am representing the owners of the Bailey's Crossroads Shopping Center, who also own this property, and that is Bailey's Crossroads LLLP. They have owned this shopping center and this land tonight for more than 25 years. I worked with them when they first acquired the property for the redevelopment of the shopping center. It was one of the first revitalization projects under the CRD zoning ordinance for the Bailey's Crossroads Revitalization District. The subject property, the land, is the vacant lots. There's actually 11 lots, Michael, and I think you only showed 10 on your drawing, but there's one more to the north. There's 11 lots. It's approximately 2.1 acres. It's a mixed zone between R3 residential and C5 retail commercial. And as I mentioned before, it is within the Bailey's Crossroads Revitalization District. The shopping center owner has sort of held this property for years there were some preliminary plans they explored expanding the shopping center here or possibly turning it into overflow parking area over the years. Nothing ever materialized. And so with the SSPA process, they thought that maybe the property could be replanned to an alternative uses that might better serve the needs of the Bailey's Crossroads community. As shown on the slide, and as Michael mentions, we're talking about a mid-rise mixed-use building with approximately 20,000 square feet per floor, which would yield approximately 60 dwelling units, 4 stories, 50 feet in height. And then on the first level would be community serving retail. This is our aerial of the site. As you can see, it's vacant. This is an opportunity, since there would be no displacement of any existing residents if this property were developed. And I have looked back on the aerial photographs of the county going back to about 1960, and maybe even further back, and it appears that this land has always been vacant. Michael showed you this drawing earlier. What we're proposing is one structure with surface parking and 2 access points to Church Street. This is how it would fit in overall. To the south of the building is Columbia Pike and the existing retail uses there. To the east is the existing shopping center, which has been performing quite well even during recent pandemic times. It's fully leased and is a very successful center for the owners at the moment. We're thinking that the current comprehensive plan is a little bit out of date, in that the site-specific language, which recommends the office type uses, is probably not realistic in the current climate and the economy. And the square footage limitations for additional retail have been exceeded in one of the land units. So as a vacant piece of property, it's sort of, there's not much opportunity for this particular piece of property. We pulled similar mid-rise buildings from other areas of the county and in the city of Fairfax, just to show by way of example here. But the current owner of this land is not a multifamily developer. They're retail specialists. What we're looking for is to add some flexibility, and if this nomination were to be successful, then they would possibly market the property or take further steps to actually develop it. As Michael mentioned, there were originally 75 nominations, now 70. Probably 65 or more of those nominations had to deal with providing additional housing in the county. There are many county policies, plans, and studies that have noted the shortage of dwelling units for the workforce. And this nomination, like many others, is looking to sort of address that need. In particular for Bailey's Crossroads, the current plan language, the planning objectives talk about improving the appearance in the CBC, encouraging revitalization for mixed use, parcel consolidation. We have 11 here, establishing pedestrian-friendly access to and from the retail areas, developing an overall mixture of residential use types, and we feel that this mid-rise level is actually a compatible transition to the neighborhood. On the other side of Columbia Pike, about here, last year was approved a high-rise multifamily project, and this would be approximately half of that size as it tapers towards the neighborhood. We think we can offer a high-quality development at this location. I would be happy to address any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Houston. And again, if you have a question, if you wouldn't mind just raising your hand in the chat to be acknowledged. Mr. Miller. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Good evening. My comment is I don't understand why the building is on the Church Street side and not on the other side away from Church Street. It seems 4 stories is an enormous building. The Episcopal Church is right across. Church Street is scarcely a street, barely 2 lanes. It seems to me this building is just going to loom over the Episcopal Church and also over what there is of a sort of a dog park there on the same property, that's the same general area where the Episcopal Church is. It seems to me the building should be away from the Episcopal Church and not on top of it.
Again, we thought that this is a mid-rise. It is taller than the church, but we felt it was an appropriate taper as far as the actual site of the structure on the property, and that could be looked at for sure.
Can you say more about that? What taper are we speaking of?
This is about at this location on Columbia Pike last year was approved a high-rise multifamily building, and then that's like 8 to 10 stories, and then this could be 4 stories, and tapering towards the church and Queen Street.
Well,
sorry about that. I was on
and
mute.
just one more comment. I would agree with you. If you drive along Columbia Pike there, you can see all sorts of buildings. But I think just for that particular area, 4 stories is quite a big building up against the church. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next, I have Mrs. Vallis.
Hi, I'm Angela Vallis, and I'm a resident of Washington Drive, a street or 2 over, and I'm just a little bit concerned also about the 4 stories. I mean, I'm not opposed per se to residential, but 2 or 3 stories would seem more in, you know, it's just going to be next to a lot of single family homes, and it just seems like a stark contrast and one that might not be welcome at all if it's like 4 stories. Also, I just had a question about in one of the either summaries or proposals that I looked at, it said there were going to be 60 units, but it described them as townhomes. So which is it? I mean, I can't imagine putting 60 townhomes on a 2-acre lot. So if you could please answer that, sir. I can't hear you. Sorry.
60 multifamily
Apartments, not townhomes. Okay. I still think that's kind of, I mean, I don't know, it just seems kind of dense for a 2-acre area. But anyway, right now at this point, I mean, because we're talking about basically, if you call 2 cars per household, that would be 120 cars, and that's a really small lane there. I guess I would just question the, my sort of summary would be questioning the amount of stories, and then perhaps maybe reduce the number of residential units. That would be my final comment for the moment. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mrs. Vallis. That's perfect. We'll make note of the concerns. Brian.
Hello. Yeah, I agree with the previous comments. I mean, I think I have several concerns. One is Church Street, like someone pointed out, isn't really an actual street. It's more of an access road. There's no drainage really. There's no sidewalks. You can't really drive 2 cars by each other. So is the county going to be improving and widening that? Adding curbs, adding sidewalks, adding drainage? How are cars going in and out of this? They're going to have to cut down through the neighborhood to get into the people living there unless they're going to cut through the shopping center. So it's going to add a lot of traffic. I think the building is too big, considering there's two houses there's one house on Church Street, and then there's one behind it with a garage. And then there are the houses on the other side on Payne that would be facing this, a 4-story building, and they bought houses thinking they lived in a residential area. And all of a sudden they're going to have a 4-story building basically that they're staring at out of their house. So that stuff all concerns me.
As part of the development of this site, the street would be upgraded with sidewalks, widened if necessary. I mean, those types of improvements would be part of the development. And really, the building would face the church.
Well, but the church, if you stand on that lot, the church is angled. So the first 4 or 5 houses on Payne Street they would look straight across at it. Like the church wouldn't be blocking their view at all. So those people would definitely see straight at this development and get the noise and the lights from. I mean, I think you'd have to think about the cutoff lights going into the neighborhood and a whole host of other things that this would, hours of operation for retail, the lighting, noise, things like that. Because these are single family residential houses along there. I just don't know how that small street supports this. I mean, I think it could support a smaller housing, but it seems to have housing and retail. 4 stories is just too much for that lot. I know you mentioned the Columbia Pike thing, but those things front Columbia Pike. This is actually more in the neighborhood. If this was like the back of something and this was facing Columbia Pike, that would make sense, but there are the buildings there already.
It's a really, I think it's a valid question that you raised, Mr. Bryan. And that's something that would, I think, have to be a part of staff's evaluation. Those are part of things that we would consider if we're authorized to study this. So we can note that if this nomination does pass through the screening process and it becomes what we call a plan amendment, then the impacts to Church Street specifically, as well as some of the neighboring streets and traffic generation are things that we would have to consider. So it's well noted for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I have someone, their name is just N, just the letter N. Can you hear me? If you've raised your hand and you haven't had a chance to speak, you're free to do so. I think it's a smaller group tonight, so you're free to unmute yourself and ask question. Okay. All right, we'll give you a few moments. I'll ask the group really quickly while we're waiting on them to work through the microphone issues. Did you have any thoughts about the considerations that staff have also raised, just our preliminary considerations, or anything additional to add to your points?
Michael, I will say our end guest that's having microphone problems made a note in the chat to add about the church that there's a preschool located inside and that there are safety concerns.
Okay. In whoever you are, thank you. We appreciate that.
I will say that this location is on a transit corridor. I don't think every unit would have 2 cars, and it would be typical for an urban area. But there will be traffic.
Just to that point, I will say that the apartments behind us that are the kind of single apartments, all those people have multiple cars and they park all over our neighborhood with them. So I kind of put back on that one.
When the apartments that you're referencing, Mr. Bryan, where are they located?
The ones of Vista Drive.
Vista Drive.
They're just on the other side of us, and they're there's not enough parking over there to begin. I mean, their cars scatter everywhere.
Okay.
All over. I mean, there's already, you're not supposed to park on our streets because of it. It's zoned or whatever, but it's never enforced. So there's cars parked everywhere at all times.
Okay. And Mrs. Irene Zinos?
Going off of what Brian just said, there is a spot at the end, at the intersection of Church and Cortland Drive. That is the only part that allows street parking to people who aren't in the neighborhood and have the residential parking district pass. Would that be something that would be evaluated to get rid of that as a part of, trying to mitigate some of the parking and traffic issues that are going to come with this development?
You said that's at the corner of Cortland and Church?
Cortland and Church, yep.
Let's see if I can.
So where the stop sign is, it's really, I guess it's sort of the intersection of both Payne and Church, and they kind of go into like a V at Cortland Drive. Okay,
got you. Potentially this one, it's off-site, but I think it's close enough that, well, let me say this: the impacts associated with this development proposal is what would be assessed, and not necessarily if there's, for example, an existing condition. What we would probably try to look at is whether that exacerbates an ongoing challenge. We would look to our parking requirements to see if there are any ways that the parking requirements could be managed on site or mitigated so that it does not have that adverse impact on the adjacent communities. But I'm hesitant to say that the review of this particular proposal will impact or change that existing concern. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Thank you. All right, and I think our guest with the letter N, if you have a comment as we move through the presentation tonight, or at the end of the presentation, feel free to mute yourself and let us know. But I think we'll go ahead and move on, and we certainly appreciate you leaving your comment in the chat. That's awesome. Mr. Houston, thank you so much, sir, for taking the time. We greatly appreciate it. I do want to pause. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, if we could take
the check.
Do a check, and if our guests are all still here for Church Street, maybe you can tell them a little bit about next steps again before they sign off.
That's a good idea. So next step for the Church Street folks, in case you need to sign off, again, are the Planning Commission workshops that we are planning to hold. It will be a series of workshops, at least 3 or 4 I know that have been scheduled. That first one is scheduled for February 22nd. That date may change, but I'm going to tell you February 22nd just so you can mark it. The Planning Commission will take a look at all 70 of the nominations that have come in across the county, including the Church Street nomination, and make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors as to whether or not they think it should be added to the work program. That workshop is open to the public, so please stay tuned to our website. And Claire, if you wouldn't mind, I think I can find it, or David, if you could leave the link to the Track on Plan Amendment webpage in the chat. You all can go to this webpage and follow along with the course of the process. So, and we will work.
Just one.
Yeah.
Just one more question. Is there like a website or an email sign on that we can get on the list to get advised of these kinds of meetings?
So Claire, do we have? I don't think we have a listserv for SSPA, did we? No. So there isn't a direct communication list. But if these become plan amendments through that process, we do still need to send letter notifications to everyone. So if this were to move to the next stage of the process, you would be notified by letter, flyer, or something in the mail. So what we're asking everyone to do is to definitely go to the webpage, the Track a Plan Amendment webpage, and add a bookmark. And then that way you can know, you'll stay up to date and you'll know where we are with the process.
And to give people a sense, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what is that webpage address, if you could please tell us?
I think we just dropped it in the chat.
Okay.
The easiest way, if you're like me and you want to find a shortcut, just go to Google and type in SSPA track a nomination. You can add Fairfax County in there, but I don't think anyone else in the country is using the acronym SSPA right now. If you just go to Google, type in SSPA track a nomination, it will get you there.
Okay, thanks so much.
Anytime. All right, and we'll do a quick check. Are there folks here that are here to talk about the other two nominations in the Seven Corners area? That includes, I think, MA04 and MA07. I hope I have that right.
One of them is the Cavalier Club property.
And please, again, feel free to unmute yourself. It's a smaller group.
Michael, would you like to bring up the map just while we?
Sure. Let's see if I can.
Maybe they didn't know they were interested in these nominations when they logged into this meeting.
Yeah, this is Clyde Miller. Are we not going to hear about them? Is there a reason not to hear them?
No, we can definitely hear them, Mr. Miller. We just wanted to get a gauge. It's a smaller group, and I didn't know who all was here to listen to what item.
All right.
But if you're interested, we definitely can. Let me let's find Cavalier Club.
Is one of these the Pistones redevelopment?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that Cavalier Club?
That's not Cavalier Club, but that's one that's coming up.
Okay.
All right, we'll jump into MA04. Let me see if I can bring my screen back so I can see everyone. Can everyone see the screen okay?
Yes, Michael.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So this nomination is, as Clara mentioned, it's located on the site of the existing Cavalier Club. It's located at the intersection of North McKinley Road and Wilson Boulevard. It's just to the east of the BJ's Wholesale Club in the Seven Corners community, if you all are familiar with that area. To the north of the property, well, let me start with the property is bisected by the Fairfax County and Arlington County line. So the northeastern portion of the site is in Arlington County, and the remainder of the site is in Fairfax County. To the north, we have a number of single-family detached homes. There is one institutional use also along North McKinley Road. There's some open space to the east across McKinley Road, excuse me. And then there appears to be some higher intensity residential use south across Wilson Boulevard. And then again, the BJ's Wholesale Club to the west. There are also a number of smaller commercial properties that are fronting along Wilson Boulevard, just east of the access point to Cavalier Club that we should note. Currently, the site is planned and developed with residential use at about 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre. If you're looking in the comprehensive plan, this is located in Land Unit E. The proposal that we'll listen to tonight offers to increase the residential density from 16 to 20 dwelling units an acre up to 20 plus dwelling units an acre. And it also includes a retail component, a ground floor retail at approximately 20,000 square feet. In total, we're looking at an addition of 300 new multifamily residential units and anywhere a range between 5 to 20,000 square feet of retail. Conceptually, you can see here the nominators have shared an idea of how this could be redeveloped. The primary structure is located at the intersection of Wilson Boulevard and North McKinley. It includes a single structure with multifamily housing above, ground floor retail, as we mentioned before. But there's also an additional parking structure that would be introduced to the western portion of the property near the BJ's warehouse. Access would remain the same with an additional access point along a newly developed private street in the northeast portion of the site. There is a component of the development, the overall development for the site that is in Arlington County, and I believe, and Sarah, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's about 20 or so townhomes that would be included in. I may have the number wrong, and I apologize. Some of staff's high-level considerations, pedestrian safety is something that we encourage in our community business centers. We see an opportunity with the redevelopment to enhance the pedestrian facilities in the area and ensure that they're well designed and that they have access to other services in Seven Corners. We will also need to coordinate closely with Arlington County so that we can ensure that we get a better understanding of the impacts of the entire development on the site, including the portion outside of Fairfax County. And then we'll note, similar to the previous development, that it does provide an additional opportunity for housing in the community. This is something, again, that the county is in strong support of. So we want to think about the benefits that come with the proposal as well. And with that, I will turn things over to Sarah Mariska.
Thanks, Michael. With me is also Evan Goldman, and Evan, I think, might want to pull up the presentation on his screen, Michael, so that he can use the cursor. Evan, I think you were going to maybe do some brief introductions and walk through this, and we are happy to answer questions everyone might have after Evan's brief presentation.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, sir.
Perfect. First of all, thank you for allowing us to speak. Really appreciate it. And thank you for considering the nomination. And thank you to Sarah for all your work on all of this. My name is Evan Goldman. I'm Executive Vice President of Acquisitions and Development at EYA. We're a local development company that's been around for about 30 years, and we build a mix of product types from townhomes to multifamily to mixed-use communities, everything from mixed income or affordable housing all the way to $2 million townhomes in Alexandria. So we have a mixed portfolio of work that we do. This is some examples of types of architecture we've built. Every project we build, every neighborhood, I should say, is unique architecture. So we're not kind of a big national builder. We're local, and we care deeply about the footprint we leave behind. This site, in this case, the property itself is owned by a company named Southern Management. They're a large owner of apartments in the region. They have 77 communities. They actually provide a ton of workforce housing in Fairfax County as well as in Montgomery and other parts of the region, and they would be staying in as a partner of ours on the development. This is the site, as Michael just walked through. It's right on the border of Arlington and Fairfax at the intersection of McKinley and Wilson. The existing building would remain in place. We've actually already met with the residents of that building and had a very positive meeting with a lot of support for the redevelopment. And we would essentially be improving the property and the amenities for those residents, as well as providing indoor parking for them, so they wouldn't have to park outdoors anymore. It's the county line cutting through the site. And so this is the entire development concept, including the Arlington piece. The Arlington component is by right, so that does not need to go through a major entitlement process. It'll just go straight to permit. But we'd be building about 40 townhomes on the Arlington side of the development. And then the multifamily piece would be on the Fairfax side, right along Wilson Boulevard. The concept is to bring retail to this corner, to create a walkable amenity for the neighbors that live in this area, both within the development as well as across the street. It's a fairly high density area already. And then a nice outdoor space with outdoor seating and outdoor cafe area. We would have a residential building above that. And then there would be a new parking deck for the existing residents of the community just next to their building. Some of the benefits of the development is it would create much better flow right now to get out of the Cavalier Club. If you want to go left, you're kind of taking your life into your hands and crossing Wilson Boulevard right at the bottom of the hill. And so by creating access for the existing residents and the new residents to get out on McKinley, they'll be able to get to a traffic light to make that left turn. There are new bike lanes on McKinley. There's a bus stop right here that goes straight to the metro, or sorry, right on one of these streets. And so gives the opportunity for people to live here and own less cars, less vehicles. And then this just gives you a sense of the concept for the retail and the outdoor open space, the idea of kind of whether it's cafe or a market kind of flowing out into the open space and creating a gathering place for the local community. Some of the project benefits: retail and walking distance to the existing buildings and existing neighborhood, ability to more safely get in and out of the development, sound separation for the existing residents. That existing building is 12 stories, and we're proposing a building that's in about the 7-story range. And so our building will be lower than the existing building, but we'll still provide a sound separation from Wilson Boulevard to the existing residents. Covered parking for the existing residents from rain to protect them from rain and snow. A safer pedestrian experience along Wilson and McKinley to get people down. If they want to walk down towards Edens, they would be able to do that more safely. And then some of the community benefits that the county typically receives: recreation facility fees, schools facility fees, affordable housing units would be building within the development, and as we said, a safer pedestrian and auto experience. Happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Given the small group tonight, I'm just going to ask if you have questions for Mr. Goldman, Sarah, or staff. Feel free to unmute yourself, and we're happy to respond.
My name is Ann Brooke.
Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Brooke.
Thank you. I was wondering, are you proposing to take down the Cavaliers? What happened to BJ's?
Oh, so no, so the Cavalier Club would remain in place. We're not proposing to take down the building at all. And we've actually already met with the residents of that building to discuss this. So that would remain in place, and the people would have replaced parking in a structured deck, and we would be developing within the parking lots. BJ's is not one of the parcels that's controlled or owned by this site, so that has nothing to do with this proposed development, but it is next door to it.
Okay, so those two properties will remain the same.
Yeah, they'll remain in place. That's right.
Just because you said that there's going to be more high buildings, that's why I thought the Cavalier Club is going to come down. So where are you proposing to put the?
Oh, were you able to see my screen that I was sharing, or are you maybe just joining by phone?
It's gone now, so I'm not really sure what I'm looking at.
Here, I can share it again. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second. So I did this quickly for the sake of time, and I now realize maybe I did it too quickly, so I'm sorry. But here's the plan. So can you see my screen now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is the existing multifamily Cavalier Club that would stay, 12 floors in gray. Our building would be in front of it along Wilson Boulevard in what's currently a parking lot. And then the townhomes in addition would be within the existing parking lot between McKinley and the building. And then the BJ's is over here on the neighboring property. So that's not our property.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I'm glad you asked.
Thank you, Mrs. Anna. Are there others? All right, I'll give it a few seconds. Don't hear any additional concerns, and if not, we can jump to our last item. I want to again thank Mr. Goldman and Sarah for your time. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks,
if you have questions about it, maybe it comes to you as the meeting progresses, feel free to leave it in the chat, and staff will provide a response as soon as we can. All right, let's see if I can get this back up. And we'll move to our last item for the evening. Okay, just let me know if you can't see it. Our last item is just off of Arlington Boulevard. It's actually at the wedged in between one of the corners of Seven Corners between Hillwood Avenue and Arlington Boulevard. It concerns two properties that includes the Pistones and I believe the new Grand Mart. The site size is approximately 2.9 acres, and it's across from, I believe, the gym, and to the east, just to the east of the two office towers that I'm sure most folks in the area are familiar with. The site is currently planned for 0.5 FAR, with, I believe, office use as an option with consolidation. And the proposal seeks to introduce mixed use residential with retail up to a 2.9 FAR. This would include approximately 450 multifamily residential units above roughly 450,000 square feet of retail space. The exact amount, I know we will have to be flexible with. It depends on, in part, the planned roadway improvements that are coming to the Seven Corners area. Those roadway improvements may impact the size of the site and subsequently the amount of the footprint of the building and the amount of ground floor retail that we're thinking about. But as part of our evaluation, the nominator has submitted approximately 450,000 square feet of total development. So I can move forward there. This is an idea of their concept. Again, this is subject to change based on future roadway improvements and right-of-way needs for improvements in the area. But this gives you a general sense of how the structures plan to fill out the site. A few of staff's considerations. Obviously, as I've mentioned, the planned roadway improvements to these to the Seven Corners area, including the Seven Corners Ring Road, will have an impact on the parcel that we'll need to think about. The intensity or the density associated with the land unit is also something that we'll need to be conscious of. There is an option for that level of density, but it includes consolidation with a greater portion of that subunit, the two office buildings that are next door. So we need to think about how the intensity fits. And then, like all of the other nominations that we have tonight, within our community business centers, it does continue the provision or offer the provision of additional housing in the county, which is something that is generally supported. So with that, I will stop and turn things back over to Sarah Mariska.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to share my screen, Michael, if that's okay.
Sure thing.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Michael, for that background. With me tonight is Kevin Aiken, as well as Chris Aiken of Aiken Properties. Make sure everyone can see my screen. As Michael mentioned, the site is about 3 acres, and it is directly next to what I still refer to as the BB&T office towers or the Virginia Bank towers, depends on how long you have been part of this area. The site is largely auto-oriented, low-rise, served by surface parking that even in this image you can see is almost unused. These buildings have existed on the site since the 1950s, and we are thinking about what they could be and what they should be in the long term. The owner has filed this nomination to allow for greater flexibility that is reflective of current market conditions and development best practices. So to that end, we don't see that the existing comprehensive plan recommendation for office is something that is achievable on this site. So we are thinking about the option for residential with some retail and really what could this be that is better serving the community in terms of the needs and the market reality as well. I've included just this plan that, as Michael mentioned, is one option for how this could develop, but we are very early in this process. This is a concept, and we look forward to the questions and comments and hope to work with staff and the community to think through what might be the best use of this site and how that might lay out. Included on this slide are just some ideas for what this could look like. And again, these are just representative images, including the recently constructed building on the other side of those two BB&T office towers. But again, we would work to discuss what this could and should look like through any planning and development process. With that, I know Kevin is on, and maybe Kevin, it might be helpful for you to provide a little bit of context about your company and the ownership of the site and your visions for the long term.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Sarah, and thanks everyone for giving us the time to be here tonight. So I'm Kevin Aiken. I'm the president of Aiken Properties. My brother Chris is on the call as well. So we work at Aiken Properties together. Just as a little background, we're the fourth generation of Aikens at the company. It was started by a great grandfather. The company, we're now in our office, which is actually just down the street from this site. We moved into this office in 1935. Not us personally, obviously, but the family's been there. So we like to think of ourselves definitely as a part of the community and have no intention of leaving. So we're in for the long haul as well. As Sarah mentioned, we don't have concrete specific plans for the site yet. Instead, we're looking for the flexibility to do something thoughtful and better for the site, better for both the property itself, as well as the county's goals and of course the community's goals as well for the site. We consider underutilized right now. And as we explore our options at this point, being this early in the process, we're really just looking for that flexibility to allow us to create a development that really works for Seven Corners and for the community. We're definitely excited by the prospects being one of the Seven Corners. We think the site has a lot of potential. We're actually the original developers of the site as well. Our prior generations built the giant food store that was there. It was constructed in 1950. And so now that we are 70 plus years on, we feel it's time for the next one. And we're looking, the way we approach these developments, we're looking for the next 70 plus years as well. So we're not looking to flip the property, do something quick. We're looking for a thoughtful, useful development that will, again, help meet the community's goals, help meet the property's goals, and help better serve the Seven Corners area and fix some of the traffic and other issues that are going on in that intersection as well. So again, I'm sorry we don't have as many pretty pictures as some of the other ones, but again, we're early in the process. But that's our intent. We're certainly looking into it. We appreciate the opportunity to talk and hear feedback from the county, from the community, as we start this process. So happy to answer as many questions as we can tonight. But that's where we stand right now. Thank you.
Awesome, Mr. Aiken, thank you, sir. And Sarah, you as well, thank you. Again, we have a smaller group tonight. If you have questions or comments that you'd like to make, feel free to unmute yourself.
I just had a general question. In this session and in previous ones and of other things, I've heard that there are planned roadway improvements in that Seven Corners area. Could you just maybe briefly tell us what that is, or is that outside of the scope of this meeting?
Not necessarily outside of the scope of the meeting. Let me see if I have Mike Garcia, if you would be able to provide an update. What I'll say quickly is that the improvements that are happening in FCDOT, that FCDOT are undertaking, are separate from the nominations, but we understand the relationship between them. So I think for this particular property, we will need to have a better understanding of what those roadway improvements are for wherever that study is before we can really think about what the impacts are going to be to this property and how it develops. But Mike, if you're available and you're willing, if you could provide just a quick update or on the Seven Corners study.
Sure. So this property is on the western side of the ring road. It's on the periphery. It was actually involved a little bit in kind of the ring road itself. We've kind of working through a Seven Corners phasing study that we have actually just started to end the process now. And this past fall, we've been going at it for about 2 years now, engaging the community on 3 different occasions through kind of multiple community meetings. But we're making a modification to the ring road on the west side, which we're kind of stopping it just as it crosses over Route 50. Again, all this stuff is on our project website. So if you search Seven Corners phasing study, you'll actually be able to see all of it. But one thing we're still working through is kind of how a site like this plays back into the ring road itself. When the comprehensive plan was adopted back in 2013 for this area and the concept of the ring road was put forth, this kind of development wasn't anticipated here. So we just need to actually, as Michael said, go back through and figure out what the impacts are and how we might need to make a modification. But in terms of the larger concept, we have the ring road is still in place. This site may contribute to it, and then there's also opportunities for them to maybe add on and enhance it to some degree. So it has to be played out through this excuse me, through this process.
Awesome, thanks, Mike. And hopefully, Mrs. Vallis, that answered your question. Mr. Miller, go right ahead, sir. And you may be on mute, Mr. Miller. Can you hear us?
Thank you, Michael.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. My question, who owns the property?
Aiken Properties.
Aiken Property owns the property?
Yes. Correct.
Good, thank you. So, Michael, maybe it's in the old days. In the old days, didn't we have RZ FDPs, rezoning requests, and final development plans that when you came in for a rezoning, you had a very clear idea of a proposal and quite a bit of detail to say this is what's planned to be put on the site. And it's on the strength of that final development plan that the rezoning was approved or not approved. I think we're getting to the point with these site-specific plan amendments where we just have an empty lot and we say, well, it's not very useful today, and that's fair, and we could put something exciting there, and that's fair, and we'd like to have a floor area ratio of 2.9, and then and effectively get a rezoning on that basis, and then the owner of that property has the right to put up virtually anything under the sun. So in the first plan amendment we talked about, we were worried about where the building is and what it faces and the effect on that building and the single family homes, et cetera, and we talked about those things. But here it's just, and what would go there depends on what happens to this ring road, which is years in the future before there's going to be a ring road. Of course, there's planning now, but it just seems to me this is premature. If the site-specific plan amendment process is going to effectively rezone both vacant land with very little concept of what the consequence of that rezoning would be, I think it's just way ahead of itself. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Miller, and your points are well taken. Trust me, they are. There are options, I think, for addressing some of those concerns. At least for where we are right now, I think what we want to get an idea of is what are the things that the community wants us to think about if this makes it to a plan amendment. So even a plan amendment hasn't been authorized for this property just yet. There are also processes that we could go through, such as a concurrent process that would ask us both at the plan level and at the rezoning level to think about both of them at the same time, so that the plan language, whatever conditions we bring forth, are more aligned with what the applicant is hoping to propose. That's an option. We'll have to wait until we get to that point, but I think, go right ahead, sir. I'm sorry.
And I understand, and in the RZFDP days, you could have a concurrent plan amendment with that, so you could do in one package. But again, you'd have a clear idea of what you're speaking. So the Planning Commission is going to hear these ideas in February, March, and I don't see this idea is going to be any different a month from now.
And I think I'd like to take everybody back to something Michael said at the overview, which is that the question for screening isn't whether we support this idea, whether a plan will be adopted. The question for this part of the process is, does this idea merit study? And should it be put on the work program so that the possibility of a plan amendment can be studied? And so that's what the plan. Go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. No, and I agree, but there's really no idea here, except there's effectively a vacant property that could be developed as a multifamily and a floor area ratio of 3, and that's the idea. And if that went through the whole process, then by right, you could do virtually anything on that property within the site plans that with no input from the public whatsoever. So I don't think there's really an idea here. There's a wish and a sense, but I don't think there's enough of an idea to comment.
Mr. Miller, this is Sarah Mariska with Aiken Properties, and I just want to say that we are here, as Ms. Johnson mentioned, very early in the process to solicit some feedback. And we do have a team that is looking at this. Our goal tonight is to introduce the concept with the understanding that we would be working closely with the community and staff to refine what this could and should look like, how we might be able to accommodate the transportation plan for this area, to think about exactly some of the conversation we had earlier about how the site is accessed, how the buildings front on the streets, the height, the exact mix of uses. And, as with any plan amendment, should this move forward, we would be working on language that speaks to those concepts as part of any comprehensive plan amendment. So would be working to refine those details through discussion and have language that requires they be part of any future zoning process. And you are entirely correct that this would, if we were successful in a comprehensive plan amendment, we would be filing a zoning and a final development plan that would, of course, have very specific details that hopefully would implement some of those conditions that we worked out through the comprehensive plan amendment process.
Yes, and thank you for the conversation. The point is, from the public's point of view, that once the rezoning has been agreed to, the public is effectively out of the process. The owner of the property at that point can develop by right whatever corresponds to what has been rezoned. And you can talk to the neighbors, of course, but in terms of public hearings, planning commission, board of supervisors, et cetera, there is none. And that's sort of,
and
once you go over the cliff, then it's gone.
And that's a fair assessment. I'm sorry, I keep thinking you're done, and I didn't mean to interrupt you 3 times in a row, but just to transition from what you were saying, you're saying that by the time rezoning is approved, there isn't a lot that the community, opportunity for community input to influence the outcome is what, right. And I just want to make sure for other folks on the call that they understand that this isn't about a zoning approval, that this isn't even about the step before that, which is a change to the land use plan. This is about, should we study the idea to see if we should change the comprehensive plan, which then would inform a zoning application.
Well, you tripped me up on my language. I think you're right. But once the plan is amended, you have a right to develop. You have a by right. You can develop the property in accordance with the plan. You still have to go through a process, but including a rezoning, don't you? Exactly right. So I guess in that rezoning, the public does have an opportunity to comment, but it's been approved for a large scale development there of a floor area ratio of 3 without much of an idea of what that might look like.
But to your point, Mr. Miller, that's some of what we hope you all can tell us now. Like what are those things that you would want us to think about, that you're going to think about or would want to think about before we reach that point? We, as staff, we can bring forth our preliminary considerations, but we always need the community's perspectives, because there's just things that we're not going to see and there's things that we're going to miss. So if you have those, if you know of the components or the things that you need answers to, that's what this meeting is for as well. Let us know, and we'll do our best to incorporate that into a plan amendment process.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The points are valid and well taken, for sure. And if you're on the call tonight and you don't know what those components are right away, I don't want you to feel like this is the only time you can share that with us. I'm going to share our contact information here shortly, but you can go to our webpage, and there's an email to the SSPA process. It's just D as in David, P as in Paul, D as in David, DPD SSPA at fairfaxcounty.gov. You can submit comments there, or if you're more comfortable, you can send comments directly to Clara Johnson or myself, Michael Burton, as well. And it's our names that you see on the screen with a dot in between, so Michael.Burton at fairfaxcounty.gov. I do want to open it up, just give a few more moments. If there's anyone else on the call that has a comment or a question about this proposal, about any of the proposals, or the SSPA process, please feel free. Awesome, thank you, Claire. Okay, let me share this one last.
I just have one question, if I could.
Sure.
So if we have made comments tonight, do we also need to send an email type thing, or not? Or I guess that would be my question.
I like to tell people you can do whatever is comfortable for you, but if you've made a comment tonight verbally, we've made notes of it. If you want one for the record, you can send it in the email, but it's not required. Whatever you're comfortable with, if you feel like your comment has been made and it's going to be documented.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. All right, let me share this. This is actually the last slide, and this is just our contact information, and I want to leave this up for just a little bit. Again, the next step after this is for us to work through all of our community meetings, compile what we've heard, the notes that we've had, and the comments that you've all given us, and package that for the Planning Commission. We will forward that information to them so that they can use that as a part of their discussions. You all are also invited again to those workshops. You can go to, I don't have the webpage on here, but it is in the chat. You can go to our webpage and stay tuned as to when that first Planning Commission workshop date is. And hopefully we'll have a clearer sense of when this particular item, if you're following one, will be discussed. So you may not need to go through all of the workshops, but if you're following this or any of the nominations that you heard tonight, you will know when. And that's all that we have for you. I appreciate everyone's time. We do this for our job. You all are volunteering your time, so we are greatly appreciative of that. Again, to all of our nominators and guests who spoke tonight, thank you as well. Are there any last questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Take care.